Okay folks, MBS. Today I'm going to be doing a compression test for you, an actual physical compression test using a gauge. Alright, now this is an eBay special one. If you haven't got a gauge, you can pick these up really cheap on eBay, or maybe even your auto parts supplier, who knows. Fairly simple, this kit. It's cheap. It's probably a little nasty. I've had it for a few years. I've used it a couple of times and it does have its little problems here and there. But that's what we got to work with. I'm sure you're not going to go out and buy a very expensive compression gauge just to do a compression test on your car. Now you get this little piece of pipe. Unfortunately it is bent, so it makes it a little bit hard to get the thread started sometimes. And the big downfall of this is because it's rubber, you can't tighten this up into the spark plug hole very well. And all it's got to seal it is this little O-ring on the end. So you may actually hear that pop a little bit during the compression test because you can't do this up tight enough to seal the O-ring off completely. So you'll lose a couple of PSI in your reading, maybe because that happens. It's neither here nor there. You get these push-on fittings. There's a straight one, there's a bent one. This requires you to actually hold the gauge when you click it together into the spark plug hole, so you'll need a two-man operation unless you've got a remote starter hooked up to your starter motor, but that will require someone to crank the engine over for you while you're pushing in on the gauge. And to be honest with you, it's quite hard. If you've got 180, 200 PSI compression, it's going to be nearly impossible, well for me, to actually hold that one in. So I'll be using the screw-in fitting. Yeah, it's the easiest. You get all these adapters to fit different spark plug holes. So yeah, it is what it is. Piece of pretty cheap. I can't remember what I paid for that a few years ago. I think they're probably around about 40 bucks these days, 40 or 50 bucks. Well worth the purchase because it'll cost you 150 bucks to get someone to compression test your engine for you, so it's well worth the money. Now, for a compression test, you need a couple of things to happen. You got to have a warm engine. Don't have to, but a warm engine is usually the in the specification when you're given a compression pressure. Like for instance, this one is 1150 to 1200 kPa, about 150 to 180 PSI, and that would be warm. If I was to do it cold, obviously I'd get a little less. So we've got it warmed up. Next thing you've got to do is get the return spring on your carburetor, take it off where it is right now, open up your throttle, full throttle, hook your spring back on to keep it there, all right? And that's done for two reasons. Number one, to get the airflow into the cylinder so it fills up with air. All right, get sufficient air in there to give you a compression. Number two, you don't want to draw fuel out of the carburetor, all right? When the throttle is shut, you will actually draw fuel from the carburetor, and that'll go in, and it's not really a dry compression test anymore. It's pretty well a wet compression test. It's not what you want. We want a dry compression test. So by opening it up at full throttle, no fuel will enter. Next, disconnect the ignition system. Okay, I know we're going to have the plug leads hanging out over the tappet cover when we've got all the spark plugs out. It isn't going to start, so you're saying, why disconnect the ignition? It's not going to fire up. Well, the problem is you've open circuited the system. You don't want that. If you're going to take a shortcut here, you could take the coil lead off and short the coil lead to earth. All right, that's a safer way. What I'm doing is I'm going to actually take the terminal off the coil, so we've disabled the ignition system entirely. Now I'm not going to cover fuel injection, guys. All right, there's a myriad of ways to disconnect ignition and fuel on a fuel injected car, and I'm not going to cover that. This is for a carbureted car, nice and easy. All right, so we've got those prerequisites: warm engine, throttle at wide open throttle, disconnect the ignition, and you are good to go. All right, well that basically covers the prerequisites. Next thing you'll see is all the spark plugs out, and we'll carry on with the compression test. Okay, all the spark plugs are out. Now would probably be a good time just to have a quick look at your spark plugs, yeah, to see what they're like. Now this has done probably about 50,000 K, these plugs, been in there for quite a few years. They are worn on the electrode, but the important thing is there's no oil on them. There's no oil around the outside or oil caked up down the guts. So I know I've got no apparent reason to suspect anything wrong with my oil rings. Compression's another thing. So that's just a little diagnostic thing that may help you, just to have a quick look at your plugs and see if there's a problem there. All right, so now, compression test. Let's get the tester and plug her in. Fairly simple. Try and straighten this out as straight as you can and just screw it into the spark plug hole and tighten as best you can. Hook in your gauge. Make sure it locks in and we are ready to go. All right, so all we have to do now, we've got it on full throttle. We've got the spark disabled. All we have to do now is reach in through the window and crank it over. We'll give you a closer look at that. Okay, 5 beats is usually enough. Okay, don't have to go much more. We have got 150, 160, about 170, 165. Okay, zero the gauge. You probably don't have to undo it. Now unscrew it and simply just put it into your next cylinder. Now this is an easy car, nice little 4-cylinder. You might have a V8. A little bit awkward sometimes on them to get this right. All right, so we just carry on. We do the same again for the next cylinder. Did you hear that pop? And that one, this is just slightly leaking back a bit. That's about 165. Now you need to write these figures down for yourself so you can actually, oh, hang on. Yeah, make sure you get them started straight, eh? Don't cross thread it. You'll have trouble getting your spark plug in the next time. All right, we'll do number 3. And that one is only 155. Yeah, so £10 variation so far, not too bad. Last one. And 155, almost 160. Pretty simple, wasn't it? Okay, you've got some numbers on your piece of paper and you're looking at it and seeing what's going on here. Now that's a dry test, all right? So mine wasn't too bad. 155 to 165, and my manual says I should have 150 to 180. So I'm a little bit on the low side, yeah? Which surprises me because it's got a little bit more compression ratio than the spec that I looked up. So a wet test might be justified here just to see if I've got sad rings. All right, but hardly any variation between them. So now we've got to do hypothetical because that's not helping you at all with the numbers. All right, doesn't matter what you've got. Let's say you've got 150 in 1, 100, 100, 150. What's going on here? The 2 cylinders are low on compression. You could almost 100%, not quite, guarantee it's a blown head gasket. Yeah, all right. A wet test may help you there. All right, we add a little bit of oil in, see if the compression comes up. Doesn't mean it is a head gasket. I'm just saying it could be a very high possibility because it's in between 2 cylinders. What if we had 100, 100, 150, 150? Then you'd have to say maybe a head gasket on number 1 between 1 and 2, yeah? So that's what we're looking for, a bit of variation rather than just a number to look at, all right? So if your numbers are all the same, but they're low, you've found a spec but they're low, then a wet test may be justified just to see if it's a sad ring. All right. I suspect that if these rings are a bit sad, I might pick up around about 30 or 40 psi, maybe more, on the next compression test when I do it. So let's cover the wet test then, yeah? Okay. Oil can. Now this depends on how your cylinder is shaped. A V8, all the oil is going to go down to the bottom, yeah? Down towards the spark plug. In this engine, it's a flat top piston. I can squirt it in around the place and it should level out and go down beside the ring. So it all depends on the design of your piston. All right, and of course how it's leaning. This is straight up and down, V8's 45 degrees over, so might not get the result that you want on a wet test on a V8. A word of warning, if you have a catalytic converter, do not do a wet test, all right? If you've stopped watching the video 20 seconds ago, you just missed that point, so I hope you kept watching, all right? So a wet test, definitely no catalytic converter, you will ruin it, because when I start this up, I'm only going to do one cylinder for you. If I was to do all four wet, there's going to be a lot of smoke coming out of the tailpipe. And we'll show you that with just one cylinder full of oil. So let's just get a few pumps in there, try and get it in at different angles. All right, so we're going to now do a wet test on number one. So we've screwed our gauge back into number one, and let's see what we've got now. Oh, bloody gauge is leaking. That's the problem with cheap shit gauges sometimes, yeah? Okay, that went right up to about 190. 190 from 150. Oh, that's a big rise, yeah? That indicates to me the rings are getting a little bit tired, okay? I haven't got the compression pressure I should have. It is on the low scale, like I am on the low scale of specification, but what was the high scale? 180 or so. And I was expecting on a new engine I probably should have had around 180, maybe 190 because of the higher compression. So my rings are getting tired. That's just the way it is. If it goes up so much, what'd that go up? That's 30 pound higher. We had a problem. If I did the rest of them, I gather I'd get the same result. But I'm not going to do them all. What we're going to do is I'm going to put it all back together now, fire it up, and you see how much smoke's going to come out of this thing when I'm done. So basically, the compression test has confirmed we've got compression. We're on the low side of the specification. The wet test shows a much better result, so we look like we've got tired rings. I don't have a blown head gasket because there's no big variation between two cylinders sitting next to each other. So that's the sort of thing you're chasing when you're doing a compression test, dry and wet. All right, so you can figure out a few things just from that test. Now I don't know why initially you want to do a compression test in the first place. Maybe you suspect there's something wrong, or you want to buy a car and you want to make sure it's got good compressions. All right, I have another video that will give you a really quick compression test by sound, by listening to the starter motor. I've got a video out on that. That can save you doing an actual compression test. It won't tell you what compression you've got, but if you've got good ears, you can pick up a speed variation in the starter motor, and that'll tell you if you've got a cylinder down. Yeah. So have a look at that video. That's pretty interesting. Quick diagnosis of compression variation, not a compression test as such. If you actually want to know a compression test, then you have to get a gauge. All right, as you saw there, El Cheapo gauge, that valve leaks a little bit. I've had that happen before on a compression test, so you just got to do it again. All right, another thing, let's say I had one cylinder down, just one. Let's say it was number one, yeah? We had let's say we come up fictitious number, 180, 180, 180, but number one was down at about 140. I would test it again, put the fitting back in, run it again, make sure it is what it said before, because it may be the gauge itself, or you've popped that little seal on the end here and it's escaped, a bit of pressure has escaped. I don't know if you heard the popping on a couple of occasions there, that seal popping off. So, but it's a piece of $30, $40 compression gauge. What do you expect? All right, for a one-off, two-off use, that's fine. Yeah, if you're a professional, then you'd get the really good set. All right, I don't think there would be any garage around that would use this piece of rubbish. Okay, but for all intents and purposes, it does the job. Now, just a quick point on fuel-injected cars. I'm not going to cover it in great detail, guys. This is old school. I'm not talking fuel-injected cars very much. Okay, sometimes just isolating the fuel on a fuel-injected car will be enough. You can still have spark being thrown out, except you do not want the spark plug leads hanging off like this unless you've disabled the ignition. Okay, you do not want to throw an open circuit spark. All right, and don't take your coil lead off, all right, to disable the ignition. If you're going to do that, ground it so that the spark got nowhere to go. It's just grounded. But if you leave it open, you may damage the coil. All right, that's all I've got to cover on EFI. All right, so there it is. We've got the numbers. We've done a wet test. I've got sad sort of rings, yeah? All right, I hope that's helped you out in your compression test. Go out eBay, get yourself a nice cheap one, because if you think about it, if you paid a mechanic to do this, you'll be up for about 150 bucks. Buy a compression gauge for 30 bucks, do it yourself. All right, that's what it's all about, saving yourself money, doing it yourself. The tricky part will be trying to diagnose it. So if you've got any questions of compression tests, something like that, you've got numbers available to you, throw them at me. I might be able to help you out with a diagnosis. All right, catch you in another video. Oh, almost forgot. The most important thing, make sure you remember to put the spring back on your throttle. Yeah, put it back to where it came from. This is on full throttle right now. Would not be pretty when I start it. Okay? Remember, even if you have to write on a piece of paper, return spring on carburetor and stick it to your steering wheel, so when you hop in to start your car, if that note is still on the steering wheel, you know you've forgotten the spring. Do not forget that spring, for goodness sakes. All right, I'm going to start it in a minute and we'll have a look at the smoke coming out of the tailpipe. It's going to be hilarious. All right, here it comes. Can you imagine if you had done every one of your cylinders wet test? That'd be coming out of there for ages. All right, guys, see yous.